on a host variety of things, but they just really haven't worked. And this is why, again, I go back to this idea of let's be results oriented. Good intentions are great because I understand the good intentions of upholding human rights, but results also matter, and the results are just not there, right? And then the last thing is around national security, especially around Taiwan, right? Because today we know that the closest and the most likely chance that U.S. and China will get into war is on Taiwan, and both sides have now built up their military. Both sides have embarked on an unprecedented level of military buildup in the name of peace, right? Preventing war. But however, we know that when you build up your military this quickly and there's no alternative, there's also a real chance for
What?
an armed.
Why Taiwan though? Why there? Is there a geopolitical like the you know what I asked? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you just asked the two most fundamental questions in this area that I spend so much time looking into, which is one is why would we go to war on Taiwan, right? So the first thing I've heard in DC was, well, Taiwan's a democracy. But that assumption quickly falls apart because there's a lot of democracies in the world, right? But the U.S. is not going to work on every democracy that's under attack. Otherwise, we'd be fighting so many wars around the world, right? So that's not it. And then now people are saying, oh, it's a war so we can protect the semiconductor chips. But that also falls apart. I mean, I worked at Intel, so I worked in these fabs, so I know if you're scared that the Chinese will take over the chip manufacturing sites, you could just bomb those sites. These are massive sites, right? Or almost all these sites use American software and American equipment. You stop the export of equipment and software, those sites are going to be useless, right? So this idea that we have to fight in Taiwan because of the chips also fall apart. And then here's the big thing, right? In Ukraine, we can actually, we meaning America and Europe, right? We can support Ukraine with weapons, money, and intelligence without actually getting there. But you have to understand, Taiwan is 20 million people. It's smaller than the population of Shanghai, the city. Its GDP is about the same size as the city of Shanghai. That's how small this place is. And it's the distances between Taiwan and China is the distance between Cuba and the US, right? Taiwan has no chance, zero chance of self-defense without the active military participation of the US if China were to invade. This would mean a direct armed conflict between the US and China. So there's a lot of war games that's been done. Because the first question I have to ask is, why are we fighting? Why do we fight over Taiwan, right? And so today I haven't been able to find a good reason, to be honest. The one semi-good reason I've heard is, well, if we lose Taiwan, we lose all of Asia. Because there are three island chains. Taiwan is the first island chain. So once China has Taiwan, it opens up the first island chain, and the US may not be as dominant in Asia, right? So the first question would be, the closest thing I've heard is, if we lose Taiwan, we lose all of Asia. But then the question I ask is, what do we lose in Asia, right? What are we losing in Asia that we're trying to protect by fighting Taiwan? And that's a question I've yet to get a good answer on. So you see, yeah, Taiwan, that's the first island chain, right? So if China has that, they can now go into kind of the South China Sea, which is the second island chain. And then, of course, the third island chain is where Papua New Guinea and New Guinea and then Australia, et cetera, are, right? So those are the three island chains that ultimately would control Asia. So that's the closest I've heard, but it's not clear to me how we lose Asia if we lose Taiwan. I remember in the Vietnam War, again, this is one we got into under a false assumption, right? The assumption at the time for the Vietnam War was, if we lose Vietnam, South Vietnam at the time, it would be a domino effect. We would lose the rest of Asia, right? The Philippines would fall to communism, Indonesia would fall to communism, Thailand would fall to communism. And you know what happened? We lost South Vietnam and nobody else fell to communism, right? That assumption is wrong. So today, again, the assumption does not stand to reality. Like, if we lose Taiwan, do we lose Asia? I don't know, right? Nobody has ever done any investigation to show that that is the truth. So, and then that gets to the point. All right, the assumption of why we fight in Taiwan is very unclear. But if we fight, what happens? So there's been many war games. Most of them are private, meaning classified, done by the government. But there are a few credible ones. One done by CSIS, which is a very credible think tank based in Washington, D.C. I talked to all the authors. In their estimate, Brew, the first battle between U.S. and China over Taiwan, and in their scenario, they assume the U.S. wins. In that first battle, even when the U.S. wins, it will lose close to 2,000 personnel, pretty much half of the people we lost in 10 years fighting in Iraq, first battle. We will lose probably 2 aircraft carriers. We will lose hundreds of aircrafts, and then maybe hundreds of, dozens, if not hundreds of other vessels and ships. But that's the first battle. And I always ask the question, okay, we win the first battle, but what about the war? Because China's not going to quit after the first battle. Nobody has ever told me that there's any case that the Chinese would quit after the first battle, right? And then there it gets really scary because there's an escalation path. Because if we win the first battle and the Chinese keep coming back, then what do? We may have to bomb their ship yards, which is close to their civilian population on the East Coast. We may have to bomb their military bases, which is close to civilian population on their East Coast. If we bomb their mainland, will they not bomb Guam? Will they not bomb potentially other territories of the United States, maybe even the mainland of the United States? And if we decide that, oh no, just simple bombs is not enough, then that nuclear escalation could go really, really high, right? If we want to set an example and show the Chinese how tough we are, then we really could escalate. And that's the scary part. Nobody even dares to answer that question, which is what happens after the first battle, because the escalation path is just so scary. It's so scary. And that's the part that scares me as well, which is we are going potentially into a war with a set of assumptions that's undefined, meaning what's in our interest. And when we get into it, we have no idea, even if we win the first battle, how we can win the war. And that war has a chance to escalate to proportions that are catastrophic for both of our countries and maybe even the globe, right? That's what really scares me. And this is why I say over and over again, these assumptions are really scary because they are many times misleading, incomplete, and some of them are patently false. And the courses of actions that we've taken based on that have actually hurt our values, our competitiveness, and our security, judging from all the evidence from the last 10 years. And this is something that, as an American, I feel compelled to point out. And as Americans, I think we really need to reevaluate. And hopefully, this is not just an American and Chinese issue, because as you can hear from this impacts the world. This impacts the world. And so we really, hopefully, especially with the young people, need to start a new conversation to say, hey, as you said in the beginning, is there a path to potentially coexistence? Is there a path to potentially prosperity for both sides? And is there a path where, heck, maybe we'll compete very fiercely, but we avoid the potential of war?
Yeah, that would be nice. That would be nice, man. I'm getting anxiety just hearing about all of those war talks. Imagine living in Taiwan right now. I much love to everyone in Thailand, everyone. It must be tense, to say the least. Yeah.
Well, this is what's interesting. I spent so much time in Taiwan before. If you talk to the average Taiwanese, they're actually agnostic.
Really?
Because they realize they're stuck between two superpowers. Much of this is actually outside of their decision, outside of their control, right? They're a chess piece on this giant chessboard that's being played between US and China. And as a chess piece, as you know, there's actually very little you can do, right? There's somebody that's moving the chess piece versus you. So I've actually found that for a lot of Taiwanese, they're not as worried as I would think. Now, of course, many of them are worried about their immediate prospect because who would want to invest in a country where there's a potential for war? Right? Who wants to build a company or a manufacturing facility in a country that tomorrow could become the battleground between two superpowers? I think a lot of them are concerned, right? A lot of young people, if you talk to them, they're concerned about their economic future, their economic prosperity, because they know that being stuck here, they can't do anything about, and being stuck here actually limits their economic prosperity.
Wow. That's a very healthy mindset, I would say. The healthiest one. Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. So just live on, live your life. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Um, Z, I know that you have to go at some point,
Yeah.
right? Are we reaching the limit?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
we
Okay.
got 5 minutes. Again, this is such a great conversation. I just want to say, look, this book is called Rethinking China,
Yes.
Challenge